They say some objects hold memories, but I never believed it until I found the music box. It was tucked away in the darkest corner of curios and knickknacks, a dusty old antique shop on the edge of town, a place that smelled of forgotten time and decaying paper. The shopkeeper, a man with eyes as old as his wares, barely glanced up as I picked it up. The box was made of dark, almost black wood, intricately carved with swirling vines and strange, unfamiliar flowers. A small, tarnished silver key was nestled in a tiny lock on the front. I felt an inexplicable pull, a strange sense of familiarity, as if the box had been waiting there just for me. Against my better judgment, I paid the man his meager asking price and took my strange treasure home, unaware that I was inviting a forgotten sorrow into my life. The air seemed to grow colder as I stepped out of the shop, the weight of the box in my hands feeling far heavier than it should. Back in the quiet solitude of my apartment, the city lights painting patterns on the walls, I placed the box on my coffee table. My fingers trembled slightly as I turned the small silver key. With a soft click, the lock gave way and the lid creaked open. Inside, nestled against worn red velvet, a tiny porcelain ballerina stood frozen in mid-pirouette. Then, the music began. It wasn't a cheerful nursery rhyme or a classical tune. It was a haunting, melancholic melody that seemed to seep into the very bones of the room. It spoke of loss and a deep, inconsolable sadness. That night, the strange occurrences started. The lights in my hallway would flicker and die, plunging me into sudden darkness, only to flare back to life moments later. I began to hear things. The soft rustle of silk, faint, indecipherable whispers that seemed to come from just over my shoulder, always disappearing the moment I turned to look. I tried to dismiss it all as my imagination running wild, fueled by the eerie music, but a cold knot of fear was tightening in my stomach. The climax came a week later, during a storm that rattled the window panes and threw shadows across the walls. I was drawn to the music box, its melody playing on its own, louder and more insistent than ever before. As I stared at it, mesmerized by the spinning ballerina, a flicker of movement in the small, clouded mirror on the inside of the lid caught my eye. I leaned closer, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't my own reflection staring back. It was the face of a young girl, pale and sorrowful, with dark, hollow eyes that seemed to plead with me. Her image was faint, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain, but her presence was overwhelmingly real. A silent scream was trapped on her translucent lips. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror washed over me, so cold it felt like ice water flooding my veins. This was not a memory. It was a presence, a soul trapped within the confines of the wood and gears, and it was in my home. In a fit of panic, I slammed the lid shut, cutting off the music mid-note. I grabbed the box, ran out into the storm-swept night, and hurled it into a dumpster at the end of the alley, the clatter of its impact swallowed by a clap of thunder. I ran back to my apartment, locking the door behind me, my heart pounding against my ribs. I spent the rest of the night huddled under a blanket, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. When morning finally came, casting a weak gray light into my living room, I felt a fragile sense of relief. It was over, but as I went to leave for work, my hand froze on the doorknob. There, sitting neatly on my doorstep, was the music box. It was clean, undamaged, and the small silver key was gleaming in the morning light, as if patiently waiting for me to pick it up and listen to its song once more. They say some objects hold memories, and I now know it's true. Some are so saturated with sorrow that they will never, ever let you go. The old painter, Elias, stood hunched in his dusty, dimly lit studio, the air thick with the scent of turpentine and forgotten time. His gnarled fingers, stained with a rainbow of pigments, clutched a fine-haired brush. Before him, on a grand easel, was his latest obsession, a self-portrait. Each stroke was a deliberate, almost desperate attempt to capture his own likeness, yet the canvas seemed to hold a life of its own. The silence in the room was a heavy blanket, broken only by the soft scrape of bristles against the taut fabric, a sound that seemed to echo the painter's own labored breaths. He worked with a feverish intensity, his gaunt frame a silhouette against the single shaft of moonlight piercing the grime-caked window. The atmosphere was charged, a palpable tension coiling in the shadows that danced at the edges of his vision. As the days bled into nights, the line between reality and obsession began to blur. Strange, unsettling events started to plague the old painter. While adding a glint to the eye of his painted self, Elias swore he saw the pupil dart to the side, following his every move. He flinched back, his heart hammering against his ribs. But when he looked again, the eye was still, just a lifeless smear of black paint. Later, catching his reflection in the darkened window pane, he saw not his own weary face, but a distorted version with a cruel smirk twisting its lips. The image vanished in a blink, leaving him to question his sanity. Faint, ghostly whispers slithered from the corners of the studio, coiling around him like spectral snakes. They spoke his name in a chorus of hushed, mocking tones, a sound that was both intimate and terrifyingly alien. Elias tried to dismiss it all as a product of exhaustion, a mind frayed by solitude and fixation. The climax arrived on a tempestuous night, the heavens unleashing their fury upon the world outside. Rain lashed against the studio window, and thunder cracked like the sky itself was breaking apart. Drawn by an irresistible force, Elias stood before the now finished portrait. The figure on the canvas was him, yet not him. It was a perfected, more vital version, its eyes glittering with a malevolent intelligence. As lightning illuminated the room in a stark, terrifying flash, the impossible happened. The face in the painting began to move. Its lips, once a thin line of stoicism, twisted into a horrifying, predatory grin that stretched unnaturally wide. A painted hand, slick with glistening oil, reached out from the two-dimensional plane, its fingers curling over the ornate golden frame. With a sickening, wet, tearing sound, the reflection began to climb out of the canvas, its shadowy features solidifying into flesh and bone as it stepped into the studio. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. The studio was pristine, bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. The doppelganger, now a perfect, uncanny replica of Elias, stood before a new, blank canvas. It picked up a brush with a practiced, steady hand and began to paint, a faint, contented smile playing on its lips. The camera slowly pans away from the new painter and drifts towards the completed self-portrait hanging on the wall. It zooms in, closer and closer, pushing past the layers of varnish and oil. There, trapped within the confines of the canvas, is the face of the real Elias. His eyes are wide with an unspeakable horror, his mouth stretched open in a permanent silent scream, a prisoner in his own masterpiece for all eternity. The curse was complete, and the canvas held its secret, forever watching from the wall.